This video has been brought to you by Vinci Analytics Agency.
In this video, we are going to dive into something which sounds super techy, but trust me, I'll make it as easy as a pie. We are going to talk about how to utilize the COALESCE function for advanced GA4 event analysis in BigQuery. Yup, it's a mouthful, but trust me, by the end of this session, you're going to toss these terms around like a chef tosses a salad. So let's get cooking. Now this video is going to be very simple, or is it? Let's find out. So what are we going to cover in this video? Firstly, I'll be starting with an introduction to GA4 event parameters in BigQuery, in which we'll be seeing the GA4 data structure when it is exported in BigQuery, along with an explanation on different data types, which are strings, integers, floats, and doubles. Next, we'll be identifying event parameter data types, in which I'll show you how to identify different data types using an example SQL query. Next, we'll be using the COALESCE function in BigQuery, in which I'll be introducing you to the COALESCE function and its utility. And I'll share with you a step-by-step guide on applying the COALESCE function to the GA4 data. We are not just going to talk theory. I'll also show you a practical demonstration of this whole process through an actual example of SQL queries. And lastly, we'll talk about data type conversion and aggregation, in which I'll share some strategies for converting data types for an effective aggregation. Plus, I'll share with you some tips on data wrangling in BigQuery, which will help you with your data analysis. Okay, so let's move on to the challenges and why this video is so important. So, handling multiple data types. Now, GA4 BigQuery exports come with a mix of data types like strings, integers, floats, and doubles, which are spread across multiple columns. Now, this diversity complicates tasks like grouping and analysis, and then understanding where this data resides. Now, users often face this confusion about locating specific data, like say for example GA session ID within different event parameters or columns. Now, this lack of clarity can lead to difficulties in querying and extracting the desired information, and then dealing with type mismatch errors within the COALESCE function. Now, the COALESCE function in BigQuery has this limitation where it does not play along with multiple data types. So if BigQuery spots multiple data types, especially within the COALESCE function, it throws an error, and this just doesn't work seamlessly. So resolving the type mismatch error in COALESCE function becomes a critical challenge. Now let's see how this video helps you. This video will help you to gain a clear understanding of GA4 data types and how BigQuery handles them. It will also help you to develop specialized SQL skill for BigQuery and GA4 data analysis. It will help you to optimize your data analysis process by managing multiple data types effectively. And lastly, it will help you to build a strong foundation for tackling more advanced data analysis in the BigQuery. So, just like my favorite character Shikamaru here, we are going to strategize our way through data analysis, making complex problems look like a child's play. So let's dive in. So as our first chapter, we'll be starting with introduction to GA4 event parameters in BigQuery, in which we'll navigate through the GA4 BigQuery's export data structure. You can think of it as the architecture of the data house which we are about to enter, in which we'll see how GA4 data looks when exported into BigQuery. And we can't really do much without speaking the language of data, so we'll also go over the different data types, which are strings, integers, floats, and doubles. So yeah, let's gear up and get those numbers and figures into actionable insight. Alright, so when we are working with GA4 data in BigQuery, it's essentially about tables and columns. And what we have here is a typical example of how GA4 data looks like when it is exported to BigQuery. Now, each row here contains an event collected by GA4 data. And within each row, we have multiple columns which shows precise data, which are event parameters. And these event parameters give you the key user interactions on your website or app. Now you might notice several columns here which are event parameter keys and several event parameters values. Now event parameter keys contains the event parameter names, and event parameter values contains the actual data, which can be in multiple formats or multiple data types. And speaking of which, let's understand these different data types. Now in BigQuery, the GA4 data mainly comes in 4 different data types, which are strings, integers, floats, and doubles. Now starting with strings, strings are essentially text values. For example, URLs or the name of the visitors that are coming onto your websites. And next we have integer values. Now integers are whole numbers. For example, total number of sessions are and total number of users. It's pretty straightforward actually. If you can count it on your fingers, it's an integer value. Next, for more precision, we have float values. Now float values are the numbers with decimals that are useful for measurements of the numbers that aren't whole numbers. And lastly we have double values, and doubles are like floats but with more precisions. They can store very large or very small numbers and are perfect for financial calculations or scientific measurements where every decimal place counts. Now it's crucial to understand these types because they determine how you can manipulate and analyze your data. Now you wouldn't add up the URLs, right? But you would definitely want to sum up the total number of page views. So take the time to get familiar with your data types and structure. It will definitely pay off. And now let's move on to our second chapter. For our second chapter, we'll be focusing on how to identify data types of event parameters. I am going to walk you through the process using a simple SQL query which we have already set up in our BigQuery console. So let's switch on to our BigQuery interface and dive right into the details. So here we are in our BigQuery console. Now let's look at this query and understand how this actually works. So this query starts with a basic select statement where we are asking for three parameters that are event name, event parameter keys, and data types for event parameter values. Now the main thing about this query is this case statement. Now this case statement is a conditional check which goes through each possible data type column for a particular event parameter, and it checks through string values, integer values, float values, and double values in that particular order. Now how this actually works is, let's say for a particular event parameter, the string value column is not null. That means it has some kind of value, just as for page location we have a link here. So this is a URL, so it comes under strings. Now what that query will do is, it will label the data type for the page location event parameter as string, and same goes for integer value as well. Now for GA session ID we have some values in integer value column, that is it's not null, so the query will label the data type for GA session ID as integer. Now same process goes through float and doubles as well. And after running these checks, the query groups the result by event name, event parameter key, and the event parameter value data types, which keeps similar items together. Then it orders them by event name and event parameter key, giving us a sorted list that's easy to read. So when we run this query, we end up with a clear table where each event parameter is matched with its data type. Now this sets the stage for whatever data operations we need to perform next. Okay, so this sums up our second chapter, and now let's move on to our third chapter where we'll see how the COALESCE function is used and a step-by-step guide to how we can apply that COALESCE function to our GA4 data. Now moving forward, we are going to cover chapter 3 and 4 where we'll unlock the potential of COALESCE function in BigQuery and see a practical demonstration on how we can use this COALESCE function on our GA4 data. So let's switch on to our BigQuery console and let's dive in. Alright, so now we are in our BigQuery console, ready to explore the COALESCE function. Now let's kick things off with a basic example to understand how the function actually operates. Now this query is quite simple. We are using the COALESCE with a null value and two integers 6 and 7. Now COALESCE is designed to return the first non-null value it encounters. And since the first expression is null, it skips over it and returns the second expression, which is the integer 6. Now it's the neat way to ensure you always have some values to work with. So let's run this query and as expected we get an integer value, which is first non-null value 6. Now it's a straightforward function that can be incredibly powerful when you are dealing with the data types that might have gaps. So now that we understand how this COALESCE function actually works, we'll now apply this on our GA4 data to get our desired result. Now moving on, this next query is a bit more complex and we are attempting to use COALESCE across different data types in GA4 event parameters. Now we are expecting it to return the first non-null value for each parameter across multiple data types. So let's run this and see what we get. Now here's an error. Now BigQuery is telling us that we cannot mix different data types like this. It needs consistency. Now this error occurred because COALESCE requires all inputs to be of a compatible data type. And since we passed it a mix of strings, integers, floats and doubles without converting them, BigQuery wasn't able to process this. Now let's correct this error and cast all of the values and data types into a single data type, that is string. Alright, let's run this query and there we go. Now all of our event parameter values are displayed in a single column as a string, and this is exactly what we were aiming for, a consolidated view of our data which lays the groundwork for any further analysis we might want to do. Also, we just streamlined our data handling processes, a crucial step that underscores the power of COALESCE in handling diverse data types within GA4. And with our data now neatly aligned, we are set to transition into our final chapter. In the chapter number 5, we will talk about certain limitations of COALESCE function, and we will be diving into some data wrangling techniques in BigQuery. So without wasting any more time, let's get into it. Alright, so we have arrived at our final chapter, that is chapter number 5, where we will talk about some strategies for converting data types for effective aggregation, along with some tips on data wrangling in BigQuery. And also we need to talk about an important consideration, that are the trade-offs of our data unification approach. Now while using COALESCE has its perks, it also means that our data isn't quite ready for certain type of analysis, like summing or averaging, which requires numeric values. Now we have turned everything into strings, which is great for consistency, but now we need those original data types back for the heavy lifting. And this is where the data wrangling comes in. And this topic is so rich that we are going to dedicate a whole new video to it. We'll dive into strategies for converting strings back to their native formats and prepping our data for aggregation. And this brings us to the end of our exploration into BigQuery and GA4 Event Parameters. We have journeyed through the galaxy of data, from identifying types to unifying them. And now we are ready to embark on our next adventure, that is data wrangling. As we close this chapter, remember that the universe of data is vast and full of possibilities. With the tools and knowledge you have gained from this video, you are well equipped to navigate it now. This is Manav from Data Vinci Consulting, signing off. Keep querying, keep analyzing, and until next time, may the force be with you.